He is often called the richest man in history. He ruled one of the largest empires that Africa has ever seen. But for some reason, most history books brush past him. He didn't just own gold. He controlled the supply that powered the medieval world. He crossed the Sahara Desert with tens of thousands of people, handing out so much gold that he crashed entire economies along the way. But he wasn't just showing off his wealth. He came back and built mosques and universities and even cities like Timbuktu. In his lifetime, he turned Mali into the center of learning, power, and influence of West Africa. This is the story of Mansa Musa. If you're interested in African history, and especially the stories that get glossed over way too fast, well, this is the episode for you. So sit back, relax, and welcome to History Camp. What's up, people, and welcome back to History Camp. My name is Mark Gagnon, and thank you for joining me in my tent, where every single week we explore the most interesting, fascinating, controversial stories from all around the world, from all time, forever. Yes, this is History Camp. This is the place where I'm trying to figure out everything that's ever happened, and there's been a lot of stuff. I only just got here. If you're looking at the totality of human existence, I'm like right at the end. And then there's, 3,000 years of recorded, written history, probably 100,000 years we've been human beings, and then 1 billion years we've been on this planet, just as, organisms. And I'm trying to figure it all out. And today is no exception, all right? But before we dive into this fascinating West African powerhouse, we got to talk to you. And I just want to say thanks so much for tuning in and making this show possible. Every time you guys click on an episode, subscribe, drop a comment, even a hate comment about that one guy that sits in the studio sometimes. It helps keep the fire burning here at camp. Speaking of which, Christos, how are you?
Doing great,
All right,
guys.
Christos, look, I just want to point out we've got a ton of comments lately of people that have been saying that you've been yapping way too much. Do you have anything to say for yourself?
I agree with them, actually, as does my family and...
Your family?
Yep.
Oh, no. Still holding on Religion Camp just said, petition for a Christos camp.
Yep.
I don't know if we can afford that. I really don't.
I mean, we have an extra camera. It's right here.
All hail Camp Christos. What the heck is going on?
There's
you
been
know what?
a surge of support lately.
I'm turning comments off,
Okay.
all right? Because I'm not going to allow this kind of mutiny, all right? This is absurd. I'm the star, okay?
Run it up in the comments. guys.
No, don't do that. All right, come on now. We're getting crazy. We got to talk about Mansa Musa, all right? Now, this is a name, if you are I don't know, just like a casual history guy, you probably hear people be like, actually, let me rephrase this. If you have black friends, you probably had heard at one point your buddy be like, well, the richest man ever is black. And you'd be like, what? I remember I was like in middle school. My buddy was like, yeah, dude, richest guy ever was black. My buddy Keith told me that. And I was like, huh? And in a way, he's right. I'll explain all the details on how this actually sort of pans out. This is a fascinating guy that completely gets glossed over in sort of Eurocentric history. Obviously in America, you learn about history from where most of our ancestors came from, which is Europe. So as a result, you hear all about what Europe was doing, which is obviously great and really important history. But there's all these other continents and people that have been out here doing stuff the whole time that we know nothing about. And Mansa Musa, I think, is a great place to start. So if you want to understand Mansa Musa, you got to understand what West Africa was before this man. So before European ships ever even really went to Africa, specifically the West African coast, you had kingdoms, trade routes, and like actual power consolidation happening on the continent. So throughout all of, antiquity from, 1 AD all the way to, now, there have been massive bustling hubs of trade that have happened all throughout Africa. So, you have gold moving north through the Sahara, or the Sahara, as Christos always corrects me. And then you have salt moving south to, be traded all the way at the bottom of the continent. And as a result, you have empires rising on this exchange. So by the 1200s, the Mali Empire had grown out of the ruins of the Ghana Empire and basically inherited its trade networks and started running them a lot better. Sorry, Ghana. So when Mansa Musa took the throne around 1312, he didn't start with nothing. He already had inherited wealth and, a trade structure and like a real political power system. And what came next was something else entirely. He took the wealth that he got, which, many rulers before him got wealth, and he turned it into a force that the wider world could no longer ignore. The way that Mansa Musa came to power, it sounds like a myth, but according to historical sources, It is likely true. Again, with any type of history from the 1300s, it's difficult to verify every single detail, but this is what historians agree on. Mansa Musa wasn't supposed to be king. The ruler before him was most likely Muhammad ibn Ku, and he was obsessed with the Atlantic Ocean. He believed that there was land on the other side, so he did something extraordinary. He built a fleet of ships, and some say, 200 ships, others say 2,000, and they sailed west. And the crazy part, they never came back. And this disappearance handed the throne to Mansa Musa sometime around 1312. What Mansa Musa inherited was a perfectly functioning empire. The gold mines were producing gold, trade routes were secure, and the state was relatively stable. Musa took power at exactly the right moment, and more importantly, he was smart enough to understand what he had been given. The exact relationship between Musa and his predecessor is still debated to this day. Some sources say that Musa was the appointed deputy ruling in his predecessor's absence. Others argue that they were related, potentially cousins or even brothers through a royal lineage. But today, we don't know exactly for sure. What we do know is that Musa stepped in smoothly, and that doesn't happen by accident. It really points to planning and a real royal legitimacy, and then, of course, political skill. Now, before we get into Musa's famous pilgrimage that shocked the medieval world, we have to first understand where all this wealth came from. It's important to understand that this part of West Africa didn't just stumble into wealth, right? The empire sat directly on top of the richest gold fields in the medieval world. Places like Bambouk and Bure, in what is now Mali, Senegal, and Guinea, were producing enormous amounts of gold every year. But Musa didn't just own the gold, he controlled the entire systems around it. And along these trade routes moved anything you could imagine. I mean, gold, salt, ivory, and even enslaved people. And at every major stop, Mali took its cut. Now, gold came through several methods. A lot of it was washed from rivers and streams as gold dust, which is a very slow and labor-intensive work, but it was very steady. And then there was also shaft mining with, shallow pits dug in to reach gold veins, and that was extremely brutal work, but extremely profitable. Now, the Mediterranean economy in the 1300s ran on gold, and a huge share of that gold came from West Africa. So Arab merchants were willing to cross the Sahara, risking, death from starvation and thirst and bandits and, just the worst imaginable conditions because what waited on the other side was worth it. And at the time, salt mattered almost as much as gold. So the salt mines at Taghaza under the Malian oversight produced massive slabs of salt that became even more valuable the farther south that you went. So he controlled the gold fields, and he also controlled the routes between them. So gold would move north, salt would move south, and enslaved people would move in basically all directions. So ivory, cola nuts, textiles, manufactured goods, all were flowing through these cities, and at every exchange point, the officials would take their percent. Now, the empires didn't need to manage every caravan or count every coin. They just needed to keep the roads safe, maintain the order, and make sure that no one could bypass Mali altogether. And no one understood this infrastructure better than Mansa Musa. He was almost like, in a way, like the Bezos of the medieval African world. Like, he didn't have to do every little thing and, produce everything. He just had to control the routes and also have a big cache of gold. Now, people today will try to calculate Mansa Musa's wealth, and they run into a problem because the numbers stop making sense in modern terms. So even medieval writers were struggling with it because they had nothing to compare it to. The historian Al-Umari would write about a decade after the pilgrimage and recorded that Musa traveled with a caravan including 80 camels loaded with gold. Now, each camel carried around 300 pounds, so that's roughly 12 to 15 tons of gold. It's difficult to really even fathom, specifically in that time and even today. Musa's wealth probably peaked around the 1320s, right around the time of his pilgrimage. He didn't just have a massive fortune. Mali controlled a massive share of the world's gold supply at this time. Some sources might even estimate roughly half, but again, it's difficult to really verify. So, that's just a different kind of power than simply just being a rich dude. And that is why people continue to come back to Mansa Musa. Today, even the wealthiest people operate inside enormous systems and markets and governments, but Musa didn't. When he arrived somewhere with gold, things would change. Like, local economies literally shifted. Entire cities would react to his enormous wealth. And that's why it's so hard to wrap our heads around it now, and probably why the story still sticks. I mean, modern economists have tried to put a number on the wealth. Some estimates land in like the $400 billion range in today's money. Others would even say that that's potentially too low, because the real issue is that Musa's wealth isn't just cash, it's also political control. Again, he didn't have to hoard all the gold. He just controlled where it came from. I mean, think about what that means. European kingdoms were desperate for gold in order to mint coins in order to stabilize their own economy. So entire Italian city-states built their banking power on access to this gold. I mean, the Byzantine empires, their entire currency depended on this flow of gold. And Musa sat on the tap, able to flood the market or restrict it when he chose. And then Musa decided to go on his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, and this changed everything. So in 1324, Musa set out for Mecca on the Hajj, which is, a pilgrimage to the holy city. We actually did a whole episode on it in Religion Camp. You can check it out there. But all you need to know is that he's basically taking a caravan, an entourage that is so massive that eyewitnesses couldn't even agree on the numbers. Some sources would say like 60,000 people. I mean, his vanguard included 500 attendants, each carrying a gold-adorned staff. His senior wife traveled with her own entourage, another 500 attendants. Just organizing this journey was staggering. The logistics alone are mind-bending. Moving that many people across the Sahara sounds like a logistical nightmare. Water sources had to be mapped in advance for months. I mean, food had to last weeks between oases. They needed desert guides and armed guards and thousands of camels in order to carry the supplies. The caravan stretched on for miles, essentially a moving city across one of the harshest environments on Earth. So, when Musa reached Cairo in July of 1324, the city had never seen anything like it. Cairo was the intellectual and economic center of the Islamic world at the time. It had hosted wealthy pilgrims before, but Musa made all of those other pilgrims look extremely ordinary. What's interesting is that at first, the Mamluk Sultan of Egypt, this guy al-Malik al-Nasir, refused to meet Musa. Court protocol required visitors to bow down before the Sultan, and Musa refused. He said he would only bow down to Allah. The standoff dragged on for days, and eventually they worked out a compromise that preserved both men's dignity. And that moment tells you exactly who Musa was. He was deeply religious, but fully aware of his own status. He wasn't willing to bow down to anyone, no matter how powerful the ruler in front of him was. As the story goes, Musa stayed in Cairo for 3 months, and he gave away gold constantly to scholars, to officials, to the poor, almost to anyone who asked. I mean, he funded entire construction projects and paid wildly inflated prices for goods. One official later reported receiving thousands of gold dinars as a personal gift, and that sent the economy almost into a shock. I mean, Musa gave away so much gold that its value in Cairo dropped sharply. The price of gold against silver fell about 12% and didn't fully recover for 12 years. Just think about that. This isn't just like a minor disturbance. Gold was the foundation of medieval currency. So when its value suddenly collapsed, everything else was affected. Merchants saw their wealth shrink overnight. People on fixed incomes found prices rising really fast. Cairo's economy had been stable for years, and Musa's extreme wealth disrupted it in a matter of months, simply just by being so generous. Now, here's the part that people often miss. Musa realized that he had gone too far. On the return journey, he tried to borrow gold back at a high interest rate to counter the damage. Whether that helped or whether he fully repaid those debts remains unclear in the historical record. A single man's spending had damaged one of the world's most important economies. The fact that he tried to fix it really matters. He wasn't clueless about economics. He just didn't see the scale of how wealthy he was and how it would actually affect a smaller economy. Now, the pilgrimage continued to Mecca, where Musa completed the required rituals. He met scholars and theologians and jurists from across the Islamic world, and he didn't just meet them, he actively recruited them. Scholars and jurists, including the renowned Andalusian poet and legal expert Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, whom he met with on the return journey, agreed to travel back with him to Mali. Now, these were the centers of Islamic civilization, and Musa convinced elite scholars to basically leave those cities behind. And that alone just tells you how persuasive he was and also what kind of resources he could offer. Now, this pilgrimage wasn't just an act of faith. It was also political in a way. In one single journey, Musa announced Mali's wealth to the entire world and forged relationships with powerful rulers, recruited top intellectual talent, and tightened control over his own empire, also while fulfilling this religious duty. And that is why the Hajj mattered so much. Now, this pilgrimage did more than, temporarily crash Cairo's economy. It also put Mali on the map. I mean, like literally. Before Musa's Hajj, West Africa was mostly a question mark on most maps that cartographers would draw, people from like Cairo and Baghdad. They were like, yeah, we know there's some people over there, but we don't know exactly what's going on. Scholars knew gold came from somewhere south of the Sahara, but the details were vague and sometimes they would just make stuff up. But after Mansa Musa, all that changed. In 1375, the Catalan Atlas, this is the medieval world map created around 1375, it shows Mansa Musa sitting on a throne holding a gold orb. European cartographers had taken notice. They couldn't ignore this part of the world any longer. Mali was no longer just an idea or this fantasy land. It was a real place with a real ruler and extreme wealth. And the impact went beyond maps. I mean, Musa deliberately presented himself as a Muslim ruler, and that really matters. It gave him legitimacy across an enormous network stretching from Andalusia to India. He exchanged letters with rulers in Morocco, he sent gifts to sultans in Egypt, and back home, he began reshaping Mali's institutions. He commissioned mosques and Quranic schools, putting Islam into the center of state life in a way that his predecessors never had. The scholars he brought back from Mecca, they didn't just teach religion, they elevated Mali's scholarly institutions. Islam had been present in West Africa for centuries before Mansa Musa, carried by merchants and traveling scholars, but it had mostly remained this urban kind of elite religion. Ordinary people still followed the traditional folk beliefs of the region. And Musa never forced conversion. That wasn't really his approach. Instead, he made Islam just unavoidable at a state level. He would build mosques in every major city. He founded madrasas where students would learn Arabic and they would study the Quran. And he brought in judges trained in Islamic law to administer justice using Sharia principles. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break real quick because we got to have some real talk, all right? If you've ever brushed off white flakes from a black t-shirt, okay? That's not dry scalp or whatever you're telling yourself, right? That's dandruff. And dandruff is caused by a fungus. Now, most shampoos don't actually fix that. No, they just dry out your scalp even more, so you just keep on buying the shampoo. And honestly, a lot of these formulas haven't even changed since like the 1960s. Every big shampoo brand was developed then, which is also when doctors were like, hey, take a cigarette for some stress. And that's why I like Flakes. See this right here? This is Flakes. It is an anti-dandruff shampoo and conditioner that actually targets the problem. It's got 2 times the active ingredient perothene zinc than the standard drugstore brands, and it was developed by a top dermatologist out of New York City. Now, here's the part that most people miss. Scalp health is hair health. That dandruff fungus irritates your scalp, which then causes you to itch it all the time. Then it leads to more inflammation, and then even shedding. Yes, it even can cause you to lose your hair. Clear the scalp, and your hair will look better and fuller and healthier. And Flakes does something that's great. They don't do like the 2-in-1 lazy thing. No. Shampoo clears the fungus and the flakes, and then the conditioner puts moisture back into your scalp with MCT oil so that your hair actually stays soft and flexible instead of breaking off in the shower. Also, it smells great. Like clean, it's not medicinal, it's not overpowering. There's no harsh junk in it that makes your scalp even worse off than it was before and keeps you in the cycle. I mean, straight up, I just used Flakes today. All right, I'm telling you, it's so moisturizing. It makes your hair feel great. Even if you don't have dandruff, it's great for your hair, and it'll keep you from ever getting dandruff. It is dermatologist developed. It's already used by hundreds of thousands of guys, and honestly, it's just the grown-up move. And right now, you can get 20% off plus a free scalp brush, all right? And a 30-day money-back guarantee if you use the code CAMP. That's C-A-M-P. And if it doesn't work for you, you're not stuck with it. Yeah, that's right. The promo code CAMP, C-A-M-P, for 20% off, free scalp brush, which feels incredible on your scalp, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. There's literally nothing to lose. Give it a shot. You're going to get 20% off. And if you don't like it within 30 days, just tell them, hey, this wasn't for me. You're getting your money back. And nothing is going to be lost, except obviously the flakes on your shirt that you've been brushing away. So look, take care of the roots, get better hair. Your black shirts are actually going to be black again. The itch on your scalp is gone. That's the Flakes promise. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because I have a story to tell you. Fun fact, after you have a child, your testosterone naturally goes down. It's a way for you to like become like more empathetic and more in touch and like protect your kid and stuff. And I didn't really believe that. But then I had a baby like a year ago and I started to feel it. Around like 3 o'clock would roll around and I would get more tired. I wasn't really sleeping that great because we just had a baby. And I was like drinking more coffee and I started getting anxious and I was like, this is not working. I was like, should I just do TRT? Like I know a lot of guys when they hit like 30, 40, they're just ripping TRT. So I was looking into it and I was like, it affects your fertility. I might want to have some more kids. So I was like, all right, there must be a way I can do this that's more natural and just like support my testosterone. So I hit my buddy David who does the ads and I was like, is there anyone that's out there doing any of this kind of stuff? And he was like, oh, you should check out Mars Men. Mars Men right here is a natural testosterone booster. This is going to just basically support your testosterone using a bunch of supplements and natural ingredients that are going to make your testosterone be what it's supposed to be, okay? Don't even think about TRT because, again, it can be overkill. You're going to be injecting your body, and it can also shut down your body's like natural production of testosterone. But using this stuff, Tungat Ali, Shilajit, vitamin D, zinc, boron, all the natural stuff that is going to be supporting your healthy T levels and helping your stamina and giving you more energy throughout the day. And honestly, it's great. I've only been trying it for, a couple weeks now. And I want to do like a before and after testosterone test and see like how much more my testosterone boosted. 91% of guys reported feeling higher energy, and the reviews on this are absolutely amazing. It's made in the USA, third party tested, and there is a 90-day money back guarantee. So there's literally no risk. You can try it for, 3 months. And if it's not for you, they will get you your money back. And for a limited time, the listeners of this program, this is a crazy deal, by the way. Most brands don't do this. You're going to get 60% off for life and 3 free gifts when you use the code CAMP at mengotomars.com. That is men, M-E-N, go to Mars, M-A-R-S.com, and use the code CAMP at checkout. And after your purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please say that you heard about them from Camp Gagnon, that we sent you there. It really helps us out. Mars Men is great. It is a natural support for your testosterone. Look, you can buy all of these supplements separately, or you can just go to Mars Men and get it all in one case. Now, let's get back to the show. Now, this strategy was largely about faith, but it was also a really effective political tool. By presenting Mali as this proper Islamic state, Musa opened doors that had previously been closed. Muslim merchants from North Africa felt far more comfortable trading there, and scholars were much more willing to travel, and the diplomatic ties became a lot easier to maintain. Mali was no longer some far-off place known for its gold. It is now part of the Islamic world's cultural and intellectual centers. The scholars that he brought needed a place to work, so Musa gave them Timbuktu. Now, you probably heard people be like, oh yeah, it's over in Timbuktu. This is a real place that had real, active, scholarly progress going on. The city was already an important trading hub, but Musa transformed it into a cultural and intellectual powerhouse. He commissioned the Jinga Rabir Mosque, designed by Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, an architect from Grenada. It quickly became a major center of learning, drawing students from across West and North Africa. It's important to note that al-Sahili wasn't just an architect. We mentioned him before as a really well-renowned poet, already known throughout the entire Islamic world. Musa met him during the pilgrimage and basically talked him into coming back to Mali. And according to Ibn Khaldun, Musa paid him 12,000 mithqals of gold for the work, roughly 50 kilos. Even by Musa's standards, that was a ton of money. And the construction itself was pretty innovative. The mosques were built using local earthen methods, a lot of mud bricks strengthened with wooden beams. Some limestone would creep in, but the core technique were ones builders had been refining for centuries. And the results were stronger structures and much bigger and more durable than many buildings before. The Jinga Rabir Mosque was just the beginning. The Sankori and the Sidi Yahya Mosque followed, and those weren't just places of worship, they also functioned as universities. So scholars that he recruited would teach Islamic law and theology and astronomy, mathematics, even medicine, and libraries were filled with manuscripts, hand-copied texts covering everything from interpretations of the Quran to Greek philosophy. And by the 15th century, Timbuktu held tens of thousands of manuscripts, possibly even more. The 3 mosque universities of Timbuktu and the surrounding cities collectively educated what some estimates suggest to be around 25,000 students when the city reached a population of 100,000. The education system was extremely rigorous. Students started reading the Quran and would just do, basic memorization, and then they would move up to logic and then grammar and then rhetoric. And at the top level, they would study law and theology so deeply that they could debate scholars from Cairo or Damascus. And it wasn't just book learning. They studied astronomy for navigation, math for trade, and medicine from Greek and Arabic texts. When Ibn Battuta visited Timbuktu in 1353, years after Mansa Musa's death, he found a city where scholars were respected and debates were public and books were prized almost above anything else. And that, again, wasn't an accident. This was a deliberate attempt to build a scholarly hub. He understood that real power wasn't just gold or armies, it was knowledge and the ability to attract the best minds. The intellectual culture that he created outlived his empire. Even as Mali's political power declined, Timbuktu remained a center for learning for centuries. I mean, students continued to come. Manuscripts kept on being copied and studied and debated. And even today, institutions like Ahmad Baba Institute still preserve thousands of these medieval manuscripts, physical proof of the intellectual world that Mansa Musa set into motion. The Jinga Ribeir Mosque still stands today, though its mud brick walls still need, constant care, like most of the earthen buildings in that region. And Musa understood what that kind of architecture really meant. When visitors would arrive in cities throughout Mali, they didn't just see mosques, they saw power, buildings meant to rival anything that was in Cairo or Damascus. And the buildings announced Mali's importance before anyone even said a word. And again, it's not just these religious places. Musa commissioned palaces and government buildings and fortifications. The royal palace in Timbuktu became legendary. Another place in Niani, the capital, featured a grand audience hall designed with help from al-Sahili. Today, the Timbuktu palace is gone, but early historians were very clear that Mali's buildings projected wealth through sheer scale and craftsmanship. And this architecture wasn't just for show, it was practical. These thick walls kept the interiors cool in the severe West African heat, and the smart openings allowed air to circulate even at midday. And the ideas came from North Africa, but they were adopted to the local materials and the climate of West Africa. Now, the result created something very unique, clearly very Islamic, but unmistakably West African. Musa didn't just build cities, he built a visual language of power that people would remember long after they left. But who was Mansa Musa as a person? The thing is, we never hear directly from him. He left no letters, no speeches. Everything we know comes from people who observed him, mostly historians. Al-Umari described Musa as dignified, astonishingly generous, and very aware of his own reputation. Generous to the point where he thought it bordered on recklessness. When Ibn Battuta visited Mali years after Mansa Musa's death, he spoke with people that, had served under him and had assisted him, and they described a ruler who demanded respect. Visitors in the court removed their shoes and threw dust over their heads, an older West African custom that Mansa Musa actually kept alive. Now, Muslim visitors sometimes found it strange, but Musa insisted on preserving these traditions alongside the Islamic practice. Now, the court itself was very carefully staged. Visitors approached the throne in silence. No one interrupted when Mansa spoke, and it just wasn't done. I mean, no one would ever dare try to show any sign of disrespect to this great ruler. Guards stood in fine armor, musicians would play traditional instruments, and servants were ready to move at a moment's notice. It was an entire show, almost a theater of power that was beautifully choreographed. But Mansa Musa wasn't a distant, far-off ruler that just locked himself alone in the palace. He held public audiences. He listened to petitions. He would ask scholars questions, like real questions. He wanted to know what they studied and where they came from, what ideas were circulating in different places and cities in the region. And chronicles mention him spending hours in conversation, collecting books, and supporting scholarship, not just for show, but out of genuine curiosity. He believed that education strengthened his rule, and his generosity became famous. It preceded him almost everywhere that he went, and it was basically controversial, even at the time. Some historians would mock it, calling his spending foolish or excessive, and in some ways, maybe they were right. Or maybe Mansa Musa knew exactly what he was doing. He was buying attention. He was building a reputation, and he made sure that his pilgrimage and ultimately his kingdom wasn't going to be ignored. And when you look at the outcome, the second explanation almost makes more sense. I mean, his Hajj became one of the most famous pilgrimages in history, and 700 years later, we're still talking about it. Now, behind all of the gold and the wealth and the theatrics, there was still an empire that had to be run. Now, under Musa, Mali wasn't tightly controlled from one center. It was a mix of provincial governors and, sort of tributary kings. Governors handled the taxes and a lot of the administrative work in specific villages, and the tributary kings ruled locally but ultimately paid tribute and sent troops when they were called. And that system only worked with constant attention. Now, Musa didn't take loyalty for granted. He rewarded governors who did well, but he kept a close eye on everyone. Officials were rotated so often that no one could actually build their own power base to ultimately challenge Musa. He used informants in these provinces to keep tabs on local conditions, and the most profitable positions went to people with close ties to the royal family. So power was shared, but it was never left unattended. The military was another pillar of control, of course. Mali maintained a standing army of around 100,000 troops that could be deployed quickly across the entire empire. And its core was an elite cavalry force, roughly 10,000 armored horsemen that were extremely fast and highly mobile. The rest were infantry, roughly 90,000 soldiers made up of archers and spearmen and units trained for siege and garrison duty. Musa didn't spend his reign fighting nonstop and constantly going on conquests, even though his campaigns expanded and really consolidated this already vast empire. Most of the time, he didn't even need to use force at all. The knowledge that he could was enough, and tributary states understood the balance of power and ultimately just stayed in line. Now, Mansa Musa ruled for about 25 years, maybe a little longer. It's said that he died around 1337, likely in his 60s. Now, the throne passed on to his son, Makhan, and it was a smooth transition at first, since Musa had already named him deputy during the Hajj. But within 4 years, Makhan was overthrown by Musa's own brother, Suleiman. Even though Musa carefully built a system, it couldn't hold forever. The records go quiet near the end of his life. There were no big wars, no new grand projects. It looks like Musa spent his final years simply holding together what he had already built. Who knows why? Maybe he was satisfied. Maybe in his older age, he kind of slowed down. We don't really know. But what we do know is this, that when Mansa Musa died, Mali was at its peak. I mean, the treasury was full, the borders were secure, the cities were thriving. Places like Timbuktu were alive with scholarship and debate, and by every standard, that mattered in the medieval world. Musa had succeeded. Now, of course, he didn't create Mali from nothing. He inherited this already powerful empire, but he ultimately made it impossible to ignore. And that's why his name survives today. But empires built by extraordinary individuals don't always survive them. Mali's decline didn't happen all at once. It was slow and, in many ways uneven. Musa's son, Makhan, ruled for about 4 years, and after the cracks started to show, power struggles followed, successors fought each other, and tributary kingdoms began drifting away. And by the late 15th century, Mali was just a shadow of the empire that Musa had ruled. And there isn't just a single cause, right? There almost never is. Some rulers are simply less sharp. They're maybe weaker, and they can't hold on to power in the same way that Musa did. The trade routes shift, new powers rise in the region, and internal conflicts ultimately drain money and manpower. And the systems that he had built slowly just began to evaporate. But there's even a more simple explanation. No one after Musa had the same mix of wealth and vision and just personal authority. Again, he wasn't just rich. He was extremely persuasive and disciplined and brilliant, constantly talking with scholars and really just commanding in a way that's hard to replace. He's maybe just a once-in-a-generation ruler. I mean, he set a standard that his successors potentially couldn't meet. He created a kingdom so vast and so powerful that maybe only he knew how to properly run it. And once someone like that is gone, even the strongest empires begin to fade. Interestingly, Mansa Musa didn't just vanish when his empire declined. The stories about him continued to circulate. He kept showing up on medieval maps, most famously the Catalan Atlas, seated on that throne with the gold orb in hand. And long after Mali's power faded, he remained a reminder of something the wider world often underestimated, is that real power existed far beyond Europe. And that's terrifying for the European elite. And that's why the story is still important. Musa isn't just a trivia fact about wealth. He stands as proof of what African societies were already capable of. Organized states, trade networks, home to scholarship and debate, and ultimately rulers who commanded respect on a world stage. And that's why people keep coming back to the story, not just because he was rich, but because when he moved, economies reacted, and that he was visionary enough and intelligent enough to spread his influence and ultimately the influence of his kingdom around the world. And power like that, is just rare. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is an abridged history of the life of Mansa Musa. I mean, what an interesting guy, Mansa Musa. I mean, so much that I didn't know before we kind of got into the research on this. But, I mean, a few things, right? Intentionally showing off the wealth of your nation when so few people know that you got it like that, I think is really helpful. I think it's powerful that you can just like pull up to a place, wreck an entire economy, and keep on pushing. You know what I mean? It's also funny that when he's traveling through the desert, he's bringing his wife and also gives her an entourage. I bet you they didn't talk the whole time. It's a very peaceful ride. Him and his girl just being like, yeah, you're good. You're good. She'll hang like a mile back. Just she likes to go slow, you know? Yeah, I'm almost positive that's what he was doing. He was like, yeah, dude, I don't want to hang with my girl. I mean, that pilgrimage is a long time. Going from West Africa to Saudi Arabia, I mean, that's a hike and a half. I mean, Christos, is there anything you learned, anything you picked up from this?
I just think it's fascinating that he was so wealthy that it predates a lot of economic principles like inflation.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably where a lot of that started.
No, yeah, exactly. Like it's like, okay, well, who's going to just have enough money to change an entire economy? And it was like, well, this guy, you know, he could just pull up and just give so much gold away that it literally devalues the currency.
Yeah, he literally left cities poorer because he was so rich.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild, right? I don't know, man. He's an interesting guy. And then also just the fact that he had such a premium on like education. I feel like he was probably just like a smart dude that was like, yeah, I want to talk to people all day. He might have been like the OG Rogan, dude. He was like, I just want to talk to scientists all the time. You know what I mean? And just pull up and just chat with them, pick their brain. That's kind of like my dream life, I think. If I was just Mansa Musa, unlimited gold, sit in my palace, people are coming in from all around the world and just going to just tell me stuff. I mean, that seems like a pretty cold take to be like, yeah, dude, I wish I was the richest guy in the world. But still, the point stands. What's interesting is that there's a few things here. One, his reigning title is Mansa Musa Keita I. But Mansa isn't a name, it just means emperor.
Didn't know that.
King of kings. And Keita ties him to the founding dynasty, descending from Sudiata Keita, the empire's founder. And yeah, I mean, there's just like so much about this guy that I just find like so captivating. It's crazy that he's kind of just like ignored.
I wouldn't say ignored. But
I guess people know about him, but like no one really knows about him, you know? It's also, I think, another testament to like Islam, that like it does give a lot of structure to places that like have sort of like folk religion, that because it was like very solidified, there's like very much like a, you know, there's the 5 pillars that like people are very like devoted to, that I think it gives a lot of structure. So when you get crazy wealth, you're like much more disciplined with it. Whereas like if you believe in like some type of pantheon of a bunch of different gods, who knows if you're going to, you know, lock it up the right way. I mean, no disrespect to the ancient religion of West Africa. I don't know really what it is. But he's also just so diplomatic and just like smart. I don't know. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. Any other little tidbits that you discovered in the research?
Timbuktu wasn't his capital. Mali's actual capital was Niani.
Yes. Yeah, we said that. Come on, Christos.
Oh, sorry about that.
We mentioned that. But, I mean, that's, you know, we're all learning here. And I'm pretty sure the capital now is Bamako. Could you fact check me on that? I'm working on my geography, my capitals. I'm pretty sure it's Bamako. Yeah, I'm wondering why it's not like the historical places. Like, is that
fact check? Bamako is correct.
I wonder, why not Timbuktu?
I don't know. It is the more famous.
It's way more famous. You know what I mean? But Bamako is a kind of a sick name.
Yeah, it sounds like the last name of an African, like from Africa NBA player.
Yeah, exactly.
Timothy Bamako.
Yeah. You'd be like, oh, I know where he's from. 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also funny because like the stereotypes of all like my like African friends is like they come to America, their parents are like, you're going to become a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to like study, you know, you're going to go to school. And he was basically like the OG African dad being like, hey, I'm going to create an entire university for you to go to. Okay. You have no choice but to go.
Pretty cool.
Legend. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of History Camp. If you enjoyed this, I got great news. Every single week we drop more history episodes going through the most interesting people from history, the craziest events, and getting into all the nitty-gritty details along with my stupid commentary. If you like it, please subscribe. Additionally, if you like religion and you like religious topics and deep dives, we got Religion Camp, and we also have Camp Gagged on the main channel where I talk to actual people that actually know what they're talking about, that are actually smart, they go to college and teach this stuff for a living. So if you like that, please join us there. But of course, you know, this is History Camp. We do this every single week, and I cannot wait to see you in the future to talk about the past. Peace.